Okay, welcome to another Bob the Father. We're here again in the dining room at St. Anne Rectory. Make sure the sound is on here. Okay. So yeah, this is just an open forum. Any questions you may have, or try to answer the best of my ability. Would it be about the faith, about maybe policies here at St. Anne, about personal life, whatever. It's all on the table. So what you don't already know, maybe let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, I guess a question I might have is there not a rule, but is it like, I've always heard that, I know that you're not supposed to do the Stations of the Cross during Easter season, but what about like the Rosary? Do you just do the sorrowful mysteries during Lent?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, so part of that is understanding what the nature of those devotions are. I mean, the thing, okay, so here's the thing, right? We always have things that are obligatory, like going to Mass on Sunday is obligatory, right? And there are certain things that are exceptions, like if you're sick or if you're taking care of others who are sick or whatever, right? But those are things we have to do. Um, and we look at it in the Christian life, at least in the Catholic life, I guess I should say, they're not that many. I mean, you have to follow the Ten Commandments, which, okay,
Everybody does.
right. But we also have these like precepts of the church. So, not eating meat on Fridays of Lent specifically, right? Even if we do some other form of penance, we should not eat meat on those days. Fasting 2 days a year, Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Even then, there's exemptions if you're within a certain age range or dietary restriction or whatever, right? Providing for the needs of the church through a time, talent, treasure, right? So what does that mean? Well, if I get a dollar, if I put a dollar in the thing every week, okay, I mean that, yeah, letter of the law, sure, right? Um, then going to confession once a year and receiving the Eucharist once a year, preferably. Now it says preferably within the Easter season. That's it. That's it. That's the minimum. That's the minimum you can do and call yourself a Catholic, right? When it comes to these other things, we call devotionals, and that's what Stations of the Cross are. That's what the Rosary is. Um, those are not obligatory. Those are basically up to your preference, right? You can do them or not do them. If you do them, it's up to you to choose which one is fruitful for you, right? So typically, what the advisement is when it comes like stations, the decades of the Rosary, the mysteries, is on Monday you say the joyful mysteries, on Tuesday you say the sorrowful, Wednesday the glorious, Thursday the luminous, and then you repeat the cycle for Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Right.
However, it would make sense to just pray the sorrowful mystery, especially during Lent,
Yeah.
instead of like the glorious or the joyful, right? Because, well, this season is directed towards a particular purpose. And so there's a rationale in saying, I'm only going to pray the sorrowful mysteries in Lent, and maybe I'll pray the glorious mysteries in Easter, and maybe I'll just pray the joyful mysteries in Advent and Christmas. Great, right? Or maybe I'll just pray the joyful mysteries all the time. It's up to you, right? I mean, that's kind of your own personal discernment.
Okay.
Same with the Stations of the Cross. The Stations of the Cross are traditionally done during the time of Lent because, again, the whole point of Lent is we're walking with Jesus and our suffering to conform with His, right? And so it makes sense to do it during Lent time, but that doesn't mean you can't do it outside of Lent. As a matter of fact,
I need to do it outside of Lent,
yeah,
but I just thought
even in
Easter
Easter,
season
even in
was
Easter,
not.
right? I mean, because Easter, you can't have the resurrection without the death, right? So for instance, I've had confessors that have given me a penance of doing the Station of the Cross, and it wasn't Lenten season. I think, actually, matter of fact, I think one of them was during Easter,
Okay.
right? So it's like, okay, now that's obligatory because I have to do that,
Right.
but again, that's negotiable. But yeah, but these things are really up to your own personal discernment, and if you feel it's fruitful for you. Oftentimes when people start to talk about dryness in their prayer, well, that's usually an indication we need to change things up. And maybe that's something as simple as like, maybe it's the time of day I do it. Or maybe it's actually more significant about maybe I need to let this devotion go and try to pick up another one, right? That's where kind of a spiritual director can be very helpful in making those determinations, help you make those determinations. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I think we as Catholics have such a guilt when it comes to devotions. Like, if I don't pray the rosary on a Tuesday, oh man, where to go to confession? Not really. I mean, that's not really matter for the sacrament. If you're getting dryness and praying the rosary, well, maybe that's an indication that maybe you should pray something else, or yeah, take a break. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So it's funny because I think a lot of people confess that, and it's like, well, that's, if I were your spiritual director, I would probably tell you there's probably needs to be a change here, and whatever that change may be, that may take some trial and error. But as far as what's proper, what's beneficial, that's a personal discernment.
And you still have a spiritual director?
Oh, of course, yeah. Wow, you're checking up on the seminary?
No, just curious.
Taking notes.
Reporting back to the rector. Oh, like Father Man's got it. No, I think actually, that's one thing in seminary formation we were, and I've seen this personally too. Without the seminary formation, there's just a benefit to having a spiritual director.
There is.
And that's something that's kind of drilled into us in seminary, and I don't think it needs much drilling because I think everyone that comes out of the seminary sees a benefit from it, unless you just had a really odd spiritual director, which I guess could be a possibility. But I would imagine most priests today that have been ordained in the last 10 to 15 years, they do have one for sure. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know I find a tremendous benefit in it. If not just like helping me in my moral life, but also help discern what the Holy Spirit is calling me to do within my vocation.
Same for confessor. I feel I like going to the same person.
Yeah, and that's also a matter of preference. I mean,
there's a little bit of spiritual direction.
Right. Well, I mean, that's actually a canonical term, spiritual director. So, what canon law dictates is that the spiritual director, properly speaking, is clergy.
Right.
That doesn't say you can't have a spiritual guide. So, when you talk about having confessors compared to spiritual directors, yeah, if they're a priest or a bishop, of course, you can have both, right? Now, I've known priests who actually keep them separate, and sure, I think there may be a benefit there too. I think it's important though that whatever you speak in the confessional should be brought to your spiritual director though too. And I think most people who have spiritual directors would realize and understand that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's benefits, there's pros and cons for both. But I think the fact if you have one, that's always a good thing. One or two or one, the same person. And typically I go to confession, my spiritual director too, but he's not always the only person I go to confession to either.
Right.
So it just kind of depends.
Do you have a particular I'll call routine or program you kind of do to help when you're discerning God's will for you? Yeah,
I mean, I kind of follow the same kind of I kind of follow the same kind of procedure, so to speak, as I've done really with my big V vocation. And I think it always starts with prayer. First off, it's a scary question to say, God, what do you want? Right? And so, like, for instance, part of that process, we've been talking in our parish council about putting up a Divine Mercy sign, right? And a lot of that starts with like, God, what do you want for me? What do you want for this parish, right? And then it's being open to what God is calling you to do. So a lot of that is reading Scripture, Lectio Divina. How is God speaking to me through the Scripture? How is God speaking to me in the silence? Like, what thoughts come through my head? Where it could be the pros, where would be the cons of that? And then finally, it's listening to people that I trust, right? Because the Holy Spirit works through others, right? And so it's only about 1% of actually asking the question, and about 99%, even more so, listening to what the answer is. And now within that, what you have to kind of look at too is spiritual warfare, right? Because there could be some obstinance, there could be some pushback, right? And so that needs to be discerned too, is like, well, is this just, and again, it can be done in ways that are not necessarily ill-willed, right? In good faith. It could be done in good faith, but it's also like, well, is this like a temptation to move away from what God wants for me, which could be very, very beneficial for me and for, in my case, as a pastor, everybody, right? Or is this maybe an opportunity to maybe readjust my discernment and say, okay, well, maybe that end goal is still the goal, but maybe how we actually do that may be different, right? So part of that discussion, which has come up in parish council, has been where to actually put the sign, like, or how to orient it, right? And I think there has been some adjustment on that. right? Because, well, maybe it's better to do it this way and they're put it over here instead of over here. Okay, you know, and part of that's just kind of being open to the Spirit and how the Spirit's leading you, right? And that doesn't mean, I mean, it also could be, sometimes it could be in unexpected ways, right? But again, the main goal when it comes to discernment is, does the end give me a sense of peace, joy, and happiness? And if that is the actual response I'm getting, then that's of God. If it's a sense of disgust or fear, or if it's a sense of, anger, that's definitely not of God. And if it's somewhat ambiguous, that just means more discernment's necessary. That's just me getting in my own way, right? So that's kind of what I kind of follow, and that's kind of Ignatian. But all the spiritual masters kind of have a similar approach. It always starts with asking God first and then listening, right? Yeah.
Just don't get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the other thing too. When it comes to discernment, it's always a choice between goods, and that's the other thing we have to be aware of too. That this is often brought up in the seminary too, and I think every person that discerns their vocation, whether it be married life, whether it be consecrated life, religious life, priesthood, whatever, you always have to ask yourself, is this actually more sacrificial for me? Right? I mean, because there's an argument made in discernment saying like, well, boy, and I had to go through this too. Like, I really feel called to the priesthood, and I think that's going to be a great life for me, and has been so far. But boy, is that really the most sacrificial thing for me? Is that the way I can conform most to Jesus? Right? And in some ways it's not, right? Because if things come easy, that's probably an indication that maybe that's not the best path when it comes, especially these big vocation things, right? But also there's a lot of sacrifice involved too, right? So that's even a discernment, right? Because what you have to understand when it comes to those things is, when it comes to discernment, when choice between goods, God wants us to be happy, not just in life to come, but also here on earth, right? And so ultimately, that's what you have to conclude is that, well, what's going to make me most happy, right? That's what God wants from me. And that means that I should become a priest because I think I'd be the most happy in that life, right? Or maybe I should marry this person. And that's also a challenge because it's not just discernment individually. You're not discerning by yourself, especially with a marriage or even with the priesthood or religious life. There's two discerning there, right? And marriage is a little bit more, there's almost like a two-parter there. Like, first, am I being called to marriage? And second, am I called to marry this person? And the other person has to make that same determination, right? Whereas with a religious life, it's more like for like a religious is, am I called to this order? First off, am I called to religious life? Am I called to this order? And then what role am I called to in that order, right? Because I think most people assume that if you join like an order like the Dominicans or the Franciscans or Jesuits, you're going to become a priest, right? Maybe not, right? There's a reason there's lay brothers and lay sisters, and there's a reason I have those different sets of consecrated life, because they all have a purpose in the church and a purpose in the world. And so maybe I'm called to be a Dominican, but maybe I'm not called to be a priest in the Dominican order. Maybe I'm called to just be a brother, not just a brother, but a friar, and live life in service in that way. And I can find true happiness in that. And I found it in the priesthood. Great, right? That's one thing I think recently there's been such a diminishment, so to speak, not just practically, but also in our discussions about those lives, right? I mean, I'm a product of Christian Brothers College High School. And when I graduated from CBC, there was 7 brothers there. And 25 years later, goose egg.
There's none there
None.
anymore? Oh, no. I didn't realize that.
Right.
Wow.
The last brother died just a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now. Brother Paul. And again, these men were great role models and great men and attractive men. Like they would, but they're no longer there. That doesn't mean they're not all there. They still have brothers, but not in St. Louis,
Oh, wow.
and
I
that's
didn't realize that.
sad.
Yeah.
So do, like, Christian brothers, they don't have any priests then?
The only person ever ordained in the priesthood in the Christian Brother order was John Baptist de La Salle,
Okay, so that was, okay. That's interesting.
and he didn't want to be.
Oh,
The only reason he was ordained the priest because he could actually start the order. That's the only way the Holy Father will let him start the order.
okay.
But when you become a Christian brother, you take a vow never to actually
Okay.
live an ordained life. So brothers are brothers.
I always kind of wondered about that
Yeah.
relationship between brothers and priests, and what the brothers' role was. And,
Yeah, no, I mean, so brothers, it's interesting to look at the hierarchy of the church, the hierarchy of service, right? At the top are always lay people. And then below that, those that serve them directly are brothers and sisters. So there's a difference between brothers and sisters and monks and nuns, right? So brothers and sisters, their main role is kind of is a more of an apostolic. It's an actual practical role, right? Like teaching, hospitals, orphanages, parish work, whatever it may be. And typically that's founded on a charism of the Holy Spirit, right? So like St. John Baptist de La Salle, for instance, his charism was, well, there's a lot of poor youth here, and they're not being educated, and that would be beneficial for them, so I'm going to do that. Guided by the Holy Spirit. I'm going to bring other people with me to do that. And that's what that order was founded on. Now, you can make an argument, is that still doing that today? I don't know, it takes quite a lot of money to actually go to CBC, but also, too, there are no more brothers there, right? So, I mean,
Or is it less expensive?
probably, yeah. It's mid-range, maybe, I don't know. But still, that's kind of what the deciding line would be. Now, there are monks and nuns, which also could be a part of the same orders. Like Franciscans has a more, lay order, which is like brothers, sisters, and they have a more contemplative side, right? Which is monks and nuns. And their job basically is to pray, right? They're more developed with the interior life. So maybe they also provide spiritual direction. Maybe they go as extreme as taking a vow of silence, or they take a vow, that they don't go into the world at all, right? So we still have some orders like that, like the Carmelites over on Clayton Avenue, or even the most powerful sisters I know, the Pink Sisters, right? So they take those vows, they kind of stay away from the world, but their job is to pray, right? Good. We need them too. It's more especially. Then you start getting in the holy orders with deacons, priests, bishops, right? But yeah, that's kind of the distinction between brothers and sisters and monks and nuns, right? So sometimes you'll hear them used synonymously, but that's not really accurate. Yeah.
Generalized catch-all.
Yeah, generally might be more of a catch-all. I mean, I think most people are more used to saying brothers and nuns than monks and sisters for some reason. It's kind of weird how they kind of.
I was in the Passionists for a couple of years. Their brothers ran the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
brothers do a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically kind of the feet, the hands, and like the actual working parts of these places.
Yeah, that was the
orders.
impression I was thinking of. It's kind of like the worker bees.
Yeah.
Maybe a guy that's not necessarily an intellectual, but he likes doing whatever. It's like, oh, okay, we need that kind of help.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great
great
example as Saint Andre Bessette. He was a Jesuit up in Canada, and his job basically was as a porter. He just ran the door, and it's like did a sacristan work maybe. And that was all he did. And it's like, okay, but people loved him, and he was always cheerful and always joyful and good. Yeah.
And he probably found his own world there.
Yeah.
Staying within.
I don't think he was a Jesuit.
I thought he was. Oh, you're right. I think it was Holy Cross. He was Holy Cross brother. That's right. You're right. Yes, he was not a Jesuit.
I didn't know what he was.
He was Holy Cross brother. Sorry, yes, we got that. I've been corrected. Let's see. All right. Good.
So where did that? Since we walked in, I actually overslept. That's why. I played golf.
The hour was on Sunday.
I played golf this afternoon, and I came home, and Rose goes, why don't you lay down here, we'll watch the news. Well, laying in bed and watching the news is like, nah, that ain't gonna happen. And all of a sudden I hear her going, it's 6:15. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, well, I'm glad he came. No, yeah, we started talking about devotionals, right? So like, is it proper to like have the like saying the rosary? Like, is it proper to like have like say the sorrowful mysteries during Lent, and then also like Station of the Cross? Like, would it be okay to do that on Easter, right? And so yeah, we were kind of talking about how devotionals are just that. They're more proper to what you feel. And that kind of led into discernment, and then how to discern. And so yeah, it was that's kind of how it developed.
I always remember about the rosary being told it as a kid by one of the sisters that we weren't supposed to say the rosary in church. As part of mass.
Oh,
okay. Because
then there was a lot of people that were doing a lot of wrong things.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I seem
That's right. There's a lot.
and I seem to remember when I was a kid,
Yeah.
there were lots of people. You could tell they had the rosary beads in church. I think her point was, when you're at mass, focus on mass.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
Save your rosary for.
Yeah, ideally that would be the case. Yeah, not do the rosary during mass is kind of ideal, but also too, like, I don't think we can judge too harshly because, the extraordinary form of the mass is really, actually, it's hard because it doesn't have as much dialogue, not much interaction as there is in the Novus Ordo, right? So if you went to mass in the extraordinary form, like before 1962 or 1970 for that matter, yeah, I mean, you're basically just kind of sitting there, kneeling there mostly, right? I mean, that's really mostly kneeling. And you're everything's in Latin, so unless you know Latin, you don't really know what's going on. Maybe if you're lucky to have a parish that maybe had enough money, you may have had like a handbill that had the English and Latin that you could read along, maybe. Right, but most places really didn't have, or if you had to go to missal, maybe you could do that.
The St. Joseph's Missal.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of harsh because I think that developed over time and this could be lack of catechesis. It could also be with the fact that Latin wasn't being taught anymore.
Yeah.
And that was even early, like in the 19th century. There was this like kind of thing like, what do I do? Well, I don't want to just sit here and be kind of like numb. So I'm going to pray the rosary, right? Because at least I can pray. I can conform that maybe what's going on in the mass, right?
Maybe where that came from was, and that was probably when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, which was in my world is where the English mass came in. So maybe her commentary was like, okay.
Now you can understand.
This is what people used to do, but now that you can, fully participate.
I think that's a charitable and fair assessment, right? That as the English came in, maybe more part of the mass, so you could actually understand. Now, say you don't need to pray the rosary, you know what's going on. But I think that's also interesting that Pius X really was the one that kind of recognized this in the start of the 20th century. He's like he actually was a reformer pope, meaning he wanted to kind of reform the liturgy, reform everything going on, so people could actually be more actively participating. And what he started actually with the breviary, which is the prayers that clergy pray every day, right? And he kind of reformed that to make it more engaging with those that are praying it, and also really upheld like praying it in common with faithful, not just as clergy, but everybody. But again, it wasn't so much about, okay, let's just say the words and do the actions. His understanding of active participation was, I'm actually doing these things with my heart and with my mind and conforming these things to what's going on in these liturgies. And some would argue, and this is probably true, that if there weren't this little thing of World War I and World War II, Pius X probably would have held another ecumenical council to kind of bring about the reforms of the liturgies. Now, maybe not exactly what we have today, but would have probably done something similar to where people actually interact better with what's going on. It's interesting to think what would have happened if those things didn't happen. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. But he was kind of the first one to kind of look at those things and say, yeah, I think we need to do something new here, right? And it wasn't until, 60 years later where that actually kind of came to fruition in some ways.
Somewhat.
I don't want to be too critical because, it was interesting, and I think we talked about this in other sessions before, but like nowhere in the Vatican II documents does it say that you should pull the altar away from the tabernacle or that you should face the people and celebrate the Mass. Those were kind of just developments. I mean, you could argue they were natural developments, and a lot of people argue, and I think this is true too. They actually is kind of a harkening back to the old house masses that were happening in the very first century of Christianity. So, okay, fair enough. But Vatican II did not dictate that. That started happening before Vatican II.
Oh, okay.
And you could say that was sort of maybe an innovation. And again, we understand, based on canon law here, that after 35 years, and the bishop is aware of what's going on and doesn't negatively say anything against it, it becomes norm, becomes canon law, right? So that's kind of where we are now. It's been done so much in so many places where the bishop has known it, that it becomes sort of the norm, or moss, what they call moss in canon law. But now the big argument is, well, if I decide to have Mass ad orientem, meaning I want to have my back to the people, well, nothing says I can't do that. But some bishops are kind of saying, yeah, we really shouldn't do that. Okay, I don't know. That seems kind of weird, but I think these liturgy wars are kind of get over the top a little bit, and unfortunately, I think they've been somewhat exacerbated in this last pontificate. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, obviously, I'm a faithful son of the church, and whatever the bishop tells me to do, I'm definitely going to do that. But also, it's like, why are we really getting so worked around their axle about these things? I really don't understand it. Now, maybe that's because I was born in the 80s, and my first exposure to the Latin Mass was actually in the seminary. So I don't know, but I mean.
I was in a seminary when we changed.
Mm-hmm.
I was in 63 through 65.
Yeah, right in the middle of it, huh?
I'm right in the middle.
Yeah. There wasn't even a rubric out
But
yet for those
that
things.
was that was high school also. And that was in 64 is when all the priests left.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of a sudden, boom, they all left the priesthood. So,
well, I like to make a distinction. You can never leave the priesthood.
no.
You can have your faculties taken away. Sure.
They
You can
became
never leave.
laicized.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, which basically just means their faculties were taken away.
Right.
Okay.
But I think it was a voluntary.
Sure.
But so many of those people, those priests, probably entered the seminary because mom and dad wanted one of their
Sure.
sons to be a priest.
Sure, probably, yeah.
And you're the second son. You don't get the business.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, that's how a lot of royalty worked. Right? I mean, so like, if you weren't going to be heir to the throne, what else? Like, you can go become clergy, or find your own path. What do you want to do? So yeah, I mean, that's why medieval ages were sort of like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the word we have called nepotism,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It just means nephew in Latin, right? That there was a lot of nephews that were appointed these positions and whatever. And, that's how it worked, But again, I mean, you could say, well, it's been working for 500 years or so what's the big deal? Well, maybe. But I think also too, there was you guys were around at that time, you probably could say more than I could, but I think there's also a mentality that there was going to be so much change that people were entering the seminary because, it's going to be great. We're going to get married, and they're going to start having women being ordained. It's going to be, amazing. And then none of that really happened.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, now I'm ordained, and I thought this was going to happen, and shoot, I don't want to do this anymore now. Maybe. I don't know.
I'm sitting here thinking, when I grew up going to school here in the 60s, okay, we had Sisters of Loretta,
Mm-hmm.
which, as sisters go, probably were more
At that time, yeah.
liberal than
Yeah. Even
their
maybe at that time they were real, yeah.
a Monday morning in 5th grade. The sisters all came in regular clothes.
Interesting.
What a revelation! They have hair. We didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, they all have hair.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that because I don't remember even like my parents saying, "Hey, this is going to happen at school tomorrow."
They may not have known.
It was just like,
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, so like, we're talking about like how these changes happened where like, the nuns came in without their habits on,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because like I think I get the same reaction when I go out, people see me in the store, especially kids.
Yeah.
Like they see me at the store, so out and about doing stuff. Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Like, why are you here? Like, what shouldn't you be like, in the church? Like, I was down in oh, that was at the fish fry a couple weeks ago, and this little girl, she's a first grader. She's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like I was here at the fish fry. Like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I work and live here. I don't know what to tell you. I was like, that's how it works,
This is my house.
Yeah, so I think if they don't see you in church or school, they kind of think they put you in a closet somewhere until they pull you out again for,
I think that was one of the greatest things is when priests come down off of the pedestal and became,
oh yeah, yeah.
People realize.
real
Yeah,
people.
well,
know?
I mean, and that's one thing I think that was what led to a lot of problems, especially in the 70s, 80s. Well, and then it kind of culminated with the sexual abuse crisis in 2000, and then, I think that was what was going on is that people were putting priests on pedestals, not understanding they were human.
Yeah.
And then, priests also didn't necessarily have the prudence to say, maybe I shouldn't be in this scenario. I've talked about this, I think, before, but like, when I was in grade school, we had these wonderful priests, plural priests. And there was one in particular who, after he left our parish, he got accused, not from anyone in our parish, but in a previous assignment. And it was determined to be a credible. Now, credible accusations means it's possible it could have happened. That's different than substantial, where you can actually have evidence of it, right? And from what I understand, and I don't, I was getting this secondhand and didn't really get this, from the horse's mouth. So I don't think it's gossip, but also I don't have all the information. In one of this former parish, there was a single mother who had 3 boys. She had to work nights, and she couldn't find a babysitter. And so she asked Father. And Father, being the man of service that he wanted to be, and at the time was like, completely acceptable. He's like, sure, I'll come over and watch the kids while you're at work. Well, apparently one of these children was having problems at school with a bully. And so Father was trying to show him some wrestling moves that would help in those scenarios. Now, of course, with wrestling, you tend to grab things and put your hands, that can be very intimate. And so, again, not having that prudence to say, maybe I shouldn't do this. It was like, I'm trying to help this kid. That was my intention. And years later, an accusation comes from it. So, I think that was kind of part of it, is that, now there's much more awareness. Like, I remember one of my assignments, I won't name nameless, but kind of similar situation. There was a single mother, had to work, and came to me and said, can you watch my 2 daughters? And I was like, no. Right? Well, why? No, I'm like, well, she's like, well, I trust you. I'm like, no, it's not about that. It's about, I'm putting myself in a situation that would be problematic. Right? And I understand, and I not that your daughters would say anything, but it's just putting yourself in that situation is not a very prudent thing
even
to do.
for us people, as lay people,
right,
probably feel the same way. Be like,
yeah,
I'm not going to get myself in a place.
Or put myself in that situation, right? Yeah. Or even ask someone to put yourself in that situation, right? I mean, and I've said before, like, I've talked about the experience I had with after I got ordained with my dad. We were over at my parents' house, and my nieces were over. And at that time they were like 2 and 1. They were young. And my dad gets up, walks out of the room, and 15 minutes comes back through the front door. I'm just like, where'd you go? He's like, well, I went to get the paper. I'm like, you can never do that to me again. So what are you talking about? I'm like, you can't leave me alone with these girls. Why? I'm like, no, it's not that I would ever do anything. But my thought is, and this is maybe not a charitable thought, I don't think it would ever happen, but let's say my brother-in-law wants to leave my sister. All he has to say is, I touched him.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? My sister never sees him again. We never see him again. Game over. Now, to be fair, Jeff, I know you would never do that. Just so you're aware, in case you're watching this, I know you wouldn't. I know that you would never do that. You're a good man. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, though, that situation is a possibility. And it may be a very, 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 very small possibility, but it's a possibility. And I, as a priest in my role, cannot be in that possibility.
Yeah.
Right.
We did foster care for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
We really only did infants. But some of the other foster parents who were doing older age kids,
Right.
or if they were doing teen girls, that was the first thing.
Yep.
It was like, first they steal your car, they steal your wallet,
Yep.
and then they accuse you. And what can you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, to that
And
point,
the state has to.
yeah.
And
I mean, even in the school, like I'm still leery about kids coming up to me hugs. You know, I mean, it's like I know they're kids and they're very innocent. And God bless them, but also it's just like, okay, you know, you try to avoid it, or if they do it, I always make sure it's out in public and there are other people present, because, oof. I mean, so the example comes to mind is actually rather recent, unfortunately. There was a priest in our diocese who was put inside. It was kind of a bad situation. He was going to visit a family out way out in the country, and they had a relationship with this family. They came to his parish, and you know they kind of developed a relationship. And you know there was an accusation made because, well, you know, even though it was with the family, there was kind of an accusation that he touched his daughter, right? Or there was some kind of kissing or affection. Now, part of that could have been cultural. I don't know, but I think he even would admit that he should not put himself in that situation. And then to compound that, at that point there was a parish school, and now this was completely baseless, but because of this one incident, this other child who was not Catholic, who was not, you know, part of the parish, you know, they made an accusation too. Now, of course, that was completely groundless and it was completely dismissed. But you know, what I think is what we see here, and this is the unfortunate thing, is that even accusations these days follow you around. Yeah. And we have certain priests in our society today who either they don't want to be put in parish settings, or they have been rejected in parish settings because they simply have an accusation that was completely groundless. Right?
Well, and that's so many priests who used to do counseling. And a lot of women who were in turmoil fell in love with them and wanted a relationship, even though they didn't have it. And it's that, and the same thing, psychiatrists have that, doctors have that. That's why a nurse is almost always present.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even say, like, as a spiritual director, and I mean, also I minister with women who are post-abortive too, and so I'm always very much aware of boundaries because you have to have those.
Yes.
One thing I tell my directees is I'm never going to call you, right? I'm never going to contact you. If you want to meet with me, you make the contact. And I just think that's just a prudent thing to do. And even with certain guidelines as far as, like, you know, timing, like, hey, you know, if you're going to contact me after 9, I'm not going to get back to you until the next day, right? Just because that needs to be known. Because one thing I have to be attentive to, first off, is my own affections and my feelings, especially with someone of the opposite sex, right? Because if I'm becoming attracted to somebody, that's an indication that maybe we need to stop that relationship, right? But also, I need to be aware of how the other person's receiving these things, right?
Yes.
Because it's my responsibility to maintain those boundaries, and if need be, break off that relationship. And I tell my directees the same thing, like, you know, if you feel this isn't working, or if you're feeling attachment to me, let me know that so I can help you find somebody else, right? Because that's one of my responsibilities too.
Right.
Now as I get older and bigger, that becomes less of an issue, I think. But that's the thing. It's, you know, you always have to be kind of aware of those things, and that's why the spiritual direction it's a very intimate relationship, right? Because you're sharing everything with that person. At least you should be, and that does form a bond, right? And so it's being respectful of that bond, and also being attentive to our own approaches and feelings and, you know, disorder sometimes towards that bond.
Well, one thing that I have thought of or thought about with the world the way it is today priests in confessionals, and they're by themselves. And they're there with maybe nobody, but
Yeah.
yet the way people can walk in church today, and everybody, a lot of people carry guns or whatever.
Oh, well, hey, if I die in the confessional, that's fine. But what I mean, I'm looking more this way. Like, I think it's also too, like, there has been a requirement to have windows in confessionals.
Oh.
So, like, we have a window in the confessional here. Now it's to the outside, but you can still make out what's going on inside. Some people have them on the doors, right? And again, that's more so not so much of like, hey, don't I can see if someone's coming up with a gun and shooting me. It's more so to protect like what's going on inside there, right? So there's no impropriety going on, right? Because I mean, even confession, like you say, Ken, that can get very emotional,
Well,
right? It can be sometimes, right?
I was told about a situation that did not happen in this diocese. It happened in Jefferson City with a child, a girl in a confessional, and she come home and asked her mother some questions that she wanted to know the answer to because the priest asked her, and she was just a small child, and the mother really got upset. So she called a friend of hers and said, the kids had confession today at school. Did your daughter say anything about anything that might have happened or whatever? And because the mother, she didn't want to tell her what her daughter told her because she'd want to influence her. She wanted, well, as it turned out, the priest did this with more than one child. It was a question he asked. They went to the bishop about it, and there was a big stink.
Yeah, I mean, see, and that's the struggle. That's the confessor needs to be more prudent. I mean, so like
this child was she wasn't even a teenager. She was a young child, and he supposedly she was asked if she masturbated.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to those like the Sixth Commandment questions, I mean, sometimes part of that is, especially with someone so young, you have to first off establish you understand what that means. So let's say if a 6-year or well 7, let's say an 8-year-old comes in and confesses to me, Father, I broke the 6th commandment. I committed adultery. My first question would be, what do you mean by that? Right? Yeah. How do you mean you broke the 6th commandment? Like what specifically did you do? Right? And oftentimes what you realize is that, oh yeah, I acted like an adult. Well, that's not what that's not what adultery is. All right, well, don't do that. I don't know. I think, but to that point, though, I mean, I think, and maybe not to condone what this priest did, but maybe have some understanding from the priest's perspective. When it comes to pornography and stuff, that's being seen now at younger and younger ages, unfortunately.
Well, all you have to do is open your computer up.
Right.
And type a couple of small words.
It could be innocuous, right? I mean, it could be anything, and you're going to probably find something that would be risque or not appropriate. And so, to that point, as a priest, I do need to know the kind and the number, right? And so when you say, usually if someone came to me and say, I broke the 6th commandment, if they're like, let's say teenager or above, my first question would be, you mean with yourself or with another person, right? Because that's all I really know. Okay, if it's with another person, okay, I know what that means. If it was by yourself, I know what that means. Great. I know what it is. How many times? A few. Good. Okay, I know that now. That's all I need to know.
Don't need more details.
That's all I need to know. Right. So again, it's part of that is trying to understand the nature of the sin. And sometimes that means I may have to ask a question or two to understand that. But once I have that understanding, that's all you need to know, and I don't need to ask any more questions. Now, sometimes what happens is the penitent might go into deeper detail. And here's the thing, I'm no spring chicken. I've been around, I know things, and so I've had experiences. So if people tell me that, I'm not going to be really scandalized. I get it, fine, whatever. I'm not really going to be like, shut up, don't tell me anymore. Because if it helps you get that off your chest, okay, good. I can take that. Some of my younger brothers, though, maybe they will say, that's all I need to know. And okay, right? The point is, I know the kind, I know the number, that's all I need to know, right? And so this priest who maybe has a younger person in the confessional, depending on what they confess. Now, if that priest is actually straight up asking, have you done that? Yeah, that's out of bounds, right? Obviously there's people who can read souls. I get that too. But even then, there's a way to kind of bring that up with a penitent that they do it, not you, right? I know Padre Pio had that great gift. But I think even he would be like, have you thought about, he would put it in a way that's more up to them to give that than it would be to like, have you done this, right? Or you have done this. So not knowing what the situation is, I would say that's probably what it comes down to. If someone confesses the sixth commandment, it may be a reasonable question to say, well, do you mean masturbation? That now, maybe even with an 8-year-old, again, I would say, do you understand what that is and what that means, right? And then there would be some clarity. All that really depends on your approach. And I hope this person didn't go to Kenrick, because Kenrick definitely did teach us very well how to do those things. Yeah, I don't know.
Years ago, I was told that the bishop got involved, but to what extent were the confessions involved, you know?
Yeah, I do know there was a graduate at Kenrick from another diocese who will remain nameless that I think he was asking the same question at the confessional, and that was also brought up and been like, but again, I think that situation, it wasn't necessarily warranted. It wasn't like someone confessed the sixth commandment was broken. They said that. It was just more, you come in, I said the bad words and I disobeyed my parents, and I was mean to my dog. Okay, have you committed masturbation? That was kind of what was happening there. It's like, well, Father, that kind of thing. So that again, I think it depends on the context there a lot of times. What's going on.
I myself, I'm not that concerned about from that aspect of the priest and the child and the confessional. Although with the way the world is today, all somebody has to do is make an accusation.
Right.
I'm more concerned with the safety of the priest and the confessional.
And that's a good concern, but I think most priests will tell you, if I die, I die. Right? I mean, honestly, oh boy, this came up actually in RCA. Well, yeah, RCA this past weekend, right? And we were talking about the afterlife, and it was asked like, are you afraid of death? And here, I think most priests will tell you, or not. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid I hope I'm in a state of grace, but even if I'm not, I know that the grace of the sacrament can be applied to me, because especially I have perfect contrition. What I fear as a priest is not leading other people closer to Jesus, right? Because my main role as a parochial administrator, future pastor, whatever you want to call me right now, is my job, and I'll be judged on how I bring people closer to Jesus. And not just the Catholic people, everybody in my jurisdiction. And so what I fear is I'll be before my Lord, and he'll say, there was this person lived over on Arlmont that you didn't interact with at all. Why didn't you?
It surprised me when you said that Sunday, that not only you felt responsibility for the people of St. Anne, but the people in the whole community.
Well, that's
my mission.
Well,
From the Archbishop.
I
You are responsible for all the souls.
I would even go farther than the Archbishop. I'd say that's my mission from Jesus.
Well, yeah.
Right, yeah.
But you're responsible for all the souls in your.
Right.
I had never thought of it that way.
That's why I don't like when people react to, well, half those kids at the school aren't Catholic. Well, no, that's an evangelization opportunity.
Yeah.
That's not a, because that really seems to bother people.
The school is ripe for the harvest.
Yes.
Right? Where are the harvesters?
And
right?
not only those kids, but their parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because who was it? We were talking that the woman, wasn't you saying that?
Right. When Rose was at one of the hospitals this year, the nurse comes in, and Rose and I are in there saying the rosary.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, I know all that. She says, my two kids went to Catholic school. And she said, they were always after me. They were saying these prayers at home and all this kind of stuff. And I think, I remember telling you guys that story. It was
right.
neat. It was like, oh my gosh,
So you're reaching the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Oftentimes, and this is not just St. Anne, this is every school throughout the entire archdiocese or maybe out in the world. You reach the parents for the children. If you get the children asking the parents, hey, Mom, can we go to Mass this weekend?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when I was as my former parish, this mother came up to me, I think it was like a year in, and she's like, I'm angry with you. I'm like, oh, I'm just an associate. What could I possibly have done?
What's new?
What did-
It's like, you're telling my children to go to mass, and they're coming to me and asking me to go to mass, and now we're going to mass. I'm like, good. I don't know how to respond to that. Like, I'm not really sorry for that, so I can't say I'm sorry, but like, good, right? That's kind of my job. So great, thanks for coming back, right? But that's how it works, and it's what's amazing about St. Anne's is something I've never experienced any other assignment I've had, especially with the school. The interaction between the kids, not just within the grades, but on different grade levels. There's a great interaction between the kids, like the older ones look out for the younger ones and vice versa, and there's a great interaction. They all know each other. And I think that's beautiful because most schools I've been at, you don't see that. And so there's a lot of Christian virtue and examples being put in there where a lot of them aren't even Christian. I think I don't know what the number is, but I mean, when I go to the classrooms, there's a hunger first off for these things. And I imagine about half the classes, they're non-baptized, right? Now, some are baptized in other denominations, good, and there's still there's seeds, but it's the non-baptized ones where you're seeing a lot of the Christian value come out. And even the non-Catholics are really more engaged about what you're actually talking about. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because as a cradle Catholic, I know when I went to grade school, sort of like, yeah, this is just the class, and I'll do it, and I still kind of gotta go to mass on Sunday, and that's all I'm supposed to do. So that's what we're gonna do. I don't know.
You're right. We take it for granted.
Yeah, I think we do.
Yeah, we do.
And I always think about growing up and literally living in a neighborhood where everybody on the street was Catholic. We had some people around the corner. They went to probably the only two kids in our neighborhood that went to public school. We call them Publix.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys, but
even they probably were still Catholic, right?
what I think you're seeing, like in our school too, is you're seeing from the outside for these folks that we're not a private club.
Right.
Because I think through the years, especially in St. Louis 50, 75 years ago, when it was a very predominantly Catholic community,
right.
You had a lot of people that became resentful of that club type atmosphere.
Well, I mean, I remember when we were talking about, I remember this vividly, actually. I can't remember what grade we were in. We were talking about the church, and like, I think the question was asked, like, is the church exclusive? And the answer was, well, and really it is. I mean, you have to be baptized. You have to actually, hold certain teachings, right? All the teachings, really, to actually call yourself Catholic. And it was sort of like, oh, now that doesn't mean anyone off the street can't come in and watch, sit down for mass, but to actually participate in the mass, you can't do that unless you actually have these criteria.
Maybe I'm asking this the wrong way. And as a priest, do you get people that come to confession that aren't Catholic? I've always thought of that.
Yeah. So good. So this gets in more like kind of the stuff that makes up a sacrament, right? So we always need matter, form, minister, recipient, right? So a valid recipient of the sacrament of reconciliation. What are the criteria for a valid recipient?
I gotta be careful.
Got to be baptized.
Baptized.
Oh, okay.
Gotta be baptized.
Okay.
What else?
Contrite.
You have to be sorry for your sins.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. If you're baptized and you're sorry for your sins, you can receive the sacrament of baptism. Now, the sacrament of reconciliation. Now, I know a priest friend of mine in another parish. There was a wife of a Lutheran minister who came to him and said, I'd like to receive the sacrament of reconciliation. Now, in the Missouri Synod, they do have kind of this understanding of the sacrament of reconciliation. They may argue that anyone can do it, but also they have ministers who are trained to it. They should be the ones to do it, right? So it's not just the fact I have the grace of orders. It's, well, I've been trained to do it, so I should be the one to do it. Now, you could say going to your husband for confession might be very odd. So, right, a little odd. So, I mean, I can understand her, and I think this priest rightly said, well, yes, but I think you need, as long as your pastor is okay with it, right? Because I mean, we want to respect the tradition and say, does your husband know this? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, well, then all right, you know. So for a non-Catholic who came in the confessional, we would probably want that same thing. Like, you probably would want to talk to your parents first. Probably, I mean, for the school children especially. So the school children, the Catholic parties usually receive the sacrament, but even I tell them they don't have to, right? I mean, this is not like you're required to have a confession. You have to do it once a year, but if you already did an Advent, I mean, you're kind of covered. So it's that, but also like the non-Catholics will come in. And so usually my response to them is, what can I do for you? Because I do explain to them too, like if you're baptized and you're sorry and you want to receive the sacrament, you can, but I would also prefer you talk to your parents before you do that, right? Because if you believe in the sacrament of confession and you believe in the sacrament of the Eucharist, then what's really stopping you from becoming Catholic, right? And so you probably would want to do some kind of profession of faith in that respect for those who are baptized. But if you come in and you say, I want the sacrament, you're baptized, and you're sorry for your sins, okay, I can't deny you. I cannot do that, right? So yeah.
I was just kind of wondered about that because
Now, how often does it happen? I will say there's been some times in high schools where it happens. It happens.
Because kids are getting older and more mature, and they're starting to realize that I've got stuff going on in me that that's.
And so it's like, hey, I mean, sure.
And the people ask me why I come to bother the Father.
They are?
To get the
Really?
answers.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, they should tell them. You should invite them next time. Tell them to come with you. Yeah. Oh, good.
I got a question.
Yeah.
That's different.
All right, Mike.
So Matthew 5:17 to 19. And what is the letter of the law, and why can it not be relaxed?
Yeah, great. So the letter of the law that Jesus is speaking about is the divine law, right? So when Jesus talks about the law, what he's talking, it depends on the context. He could be talking about, he's always talking about the divine law. So in this passage in particular, he's talking about the divine law, right? So in other words, hey, the Ten Commandments, you can't wipe those away, right? That's the word of God. Those are my words. They are eternal, right? Now, when we look at like Leviticus and Exodus and those books, the laws of Moses, right? So in a broader sense, he's talking about the laws of Moses, right? And so you could say, well, wait a minute, Father, what about this whole thing about the prohibition on shellfish or, cheeseburgers, right? Because you can't boil the kid in your mother's milk, right? That's a cheeseburger, right? So what about those things? Should we retain kosher laws, right? I mean, that's in Leviticus. I mean, I don't know how many people have oxen anymore, but I really shouldn't muzzle my ox when they're threading out the wheat, right? Well, we have different things for that now, but maybe that doesn't really apply. Well, okay, but here's I think the Catholic response to that is like, well, you can still do that, right? No one's saying you can't. As a matter of fact, when it comes like circumcision, well, what the Council of Jerusalem kind of put out there was that, a pagan, an adult who's coming in from conversion doesn't have to go through circumcision because they weren't part of that covenant, right? Now, there may be an argument for someone of Jewish descent who is maybe converted, or let's say you have a Jewish culturally Jewish person who is
the Mosaic law.
Yeah, well, again, this is all the Mosaic law,
right?
So the ceremonial, the juridical, and the divine all are kind of come from the Mosaic law, right? Yeah.
But I was thinking, there's so many of those
right.
laws,
well, and that's
which are now midrash.
Right, yeah. A lot of them are midrashes, right? And so those were all put into place by the people after the time of Moses. But again, we realize when Jesus is talking figuratively, literally, because he's talking figuratively, he goes and tells his disciples what he actually means. So like in John chapter 6, when he's talking about gnaw on my flesh and drink my blood, when he goes to the disciples, he doesn't clarify any further. He doesn't say like, this is what I mean. He's like, no, this is what I mean. You know, this is it. Go ahead and take it or leave it. Right. I said it. What are you going to do? To the point where he even lets them go. Right. So that's usually the indication when Jesus is talking figuratively or literally. But when we talk about this fulfillment of the law, well, obviously that culminates in his sacrifice on the cross.
Okay, yeah.
But again, if you wanted to maintain all the laws of Leviticus, go for it. No one's saying you can't, right?
Right.
But I think the point is Jesus fulfilled those laws. So you don't have to, so to speak. But the divine law is always going to be eternal. You cannot change that.
Okay.
That is the actual words of God written by his finger that were given to us on Mount Sinai. So we can't change that. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
What about in the Gospels when Jesus does a miracle,
Yeah.
and he's real telling people not, isn't there?
Yeah,
he tells,
yeah,
don't
yeah,
go
yeah.
telling anybody
Yeah,
about
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I always,
Yeah,
that-
actually, it's funny. What was it? Oh, wait, what was it? Maybe about 2 months ago, maybe we had that gospel passage about
Yeah.
there was the
blind
the paralytic.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. The
Blind wo-
no,
the
Yeah.
woman with the-
no. It was the leper.
leprosy.
Leper, yeah.
Yeah.
So he had this leper, and he cures this leper, and tells the leper, "Don't go tell anyone," and then he goes out and does it immediately, right? So yeah, the homily I gave that weekend, I was talking about like, imagine like meeting your idol, right? That oftentimes when we meet our idols, there's sort of this perception we have in our minds that is not equal to reality, right?
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know, Taylor Swift, let's say,
Yeah.
right? In our minds, Taylor Swift is pure the driven snow and everything she says is gospel. And, she lives this really fantastic life. But then we actually go meet her and we figure out what a mess she may be. I don't know if she is or I really don't know for sure, but sometimes that happens, right? And so it's not that Jesus has a mess of a life that people can't be attracted to or like receive. In that moment in time, though, the people thought that the Messiah was going to be this military general or this king that would lead them out of the rule of Romans, right? And so what Jesus is trying to get at is that he's not that. And so he can't do that in a broad way. He needs to show that more on a micro way. So people can actually understand for themselves who he is. And so by saying, hey, don't tell anyone this, what he's trying to do is keep them from going off and making him a king or a general to what he's not really supposed to be, right? We call that the messianic secret, right? And there's a bunch of different theories about why that happens. I mean, some could be that, that really wasn't until the resurrection that this will be manifested so that people can really see him for who he truly is. Again, some were just sort of like, trying to keep them from making him the king and something he's not going to be. There was actually even that story, at the end of that passage, we learned that Jesus couldn't go into the towns anymore.
Yeah.
Right? He was now regulated to outside in the outskirts, and people had to come to him.
Sure.
Now you could say, well, that's really hindered his ministry, because if he's trying to actually interact with the most people and get the message out the best, he should be there where people are. I think the opposite argument, and this may be part of his plan in the long run, was he was more effectual in the one-on-one interactions than he was in the the broadcasting, right? So like you look at like the Sermon on the Mount, how many people started following him at the Sermon on the Mount? Well, not too many, right? But hey, that leper started following him, the blind man started following him, right? The rich young man started following him, or at least we think he came back. Who knows, right? So he had much more evangelistic on the one-on-ones or the micros, which I think for us the message is that's how we're supposed to evangelize too.
But the thing is, when he tells those people, human nature is like, hey, look, I was a leper. I'm cured.
Yeah.
Look you're so proud of it. You've got to proclaim it.
Well, I think so here's the thing. I think what that is supposed to actually is a respect of human nature, because our human natures are governed by intellect, right? And so by telling these people, hey, look, I have a reasoning here that I don't want you to ruin. You need to use your intellect to understand this and do this what I'm telling you to do, right? Now, to your point though, Mike, yeah, if I just been cured of leprosy and I've been leper my whole life, or maybe I haven't walked for 38 years and I'm cured, that'll be really, really hard for me not to be like, hey, look, this guy Jesus, I don't know, right? He's pretty amazing. But that's the point, is that our intellect is meant to govern those things, our emotions, right? And we're meant to actually look at that higher reasoning and that faith to say, that's my guiding post. And if I really believe this actually is God, which he's saying he is, and he's showing that he is, maybe I should actually listen to what he's telling me. Because a deeper question behind those passages are those people sinning? Because God has given a direct command, don't tell anyone about this.
I also wondered too if it was the thinking of not making his ministry seem like another. Weren't there in ancient times like that people that were like, I want to call them almost like circus clowns or something, the court jester or people, and try and kind of keep him from looking like another one of these guys. Does that make sense?
That's kind of what Herod thought, right?
Yeah.
When he went to the court of Herod during his during his arrest, that's what Herod's looking for. Give me a trick.
Yeah.
Show me that you are really who you say are. Just do something here, right? So yeah. Now again, that didn't at least for Herod that didn't really fall. Yeah. But I think more importantly, what he was doing was actually all in line with the Old Testament. So these things that he was doing were the same things that many of the prophets were doing too. And so that was also a sign. So if I were a first century Jew and I'm seeing this person who says he's the Son of God, the Messiah, and now he's making lame people walk and the blind see and making leprosy disappear, which Elisha did that with Naaman, right?
Yeah.
Now he did it though through the waters of the Jordan. He's doing it by himself, right? He's bringing people back to life. Now Elijah did that too, but Elijah, there was some other factor there. He's just doing it by his word. So if I'm hearing these things, I'm seeing these things, my thought is, wow, there's a lot of those old prophecies are being fulfilled here in this guy. And not only fulfilled, but they're going beyond what those prophets did. So, okay, now if he's telling me, then I shouldn't really tell anyone else is going on here. Maybe I should take that advice.
But how many of the common people?
No, so that's the point. The common people. So we have to understand this too about the Jewish people, the Israelites. They were an audible people. They were handing down their stories by word of mouth, right? There were a lot of them wasn't written down until about 300 years before Jesus. So the point is though that they also the Israelites were very educated people. Maybe not like in philosophy, but they knew the scriptures. Because the scriptures were told every day, right? They would tell these stories every day, and children would be told by their parents every day. So these things that happen in the Old Testament with Moses especially, or even in Genesis, or all through the prophets, they would have known that, right? And so, we would be amiss if we said that these are just ignorant peasants that knew nothing about Scripture or the Old Testament or about these things. They were very educated on those things, right? Even their most basic Jew would have known those basic things and been like, oh yeah, that story about the dry bones of Elijah, he just raised that child over there. Wow. And he didn't do it through like any action, just said it. Oh, yeah, that Elisha, he cleansed Naaman, the general, back before the exile, and he just told this guy to go wash, and he's clean.
I think there would have been more followers if they were that intelligent.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying though. Those sort of things probably brought more followers. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the mass produce. It was just like, wow,
one-on-one.
Right. Yeah. Look what he did there. There's something about this guy, right? Even the feeding the 5,000, right? there was only 5 loaves and 2 fish. I know we got 12 of these baskets floating around. I'm following that guy. I don't have to work. I don't have to work for the rest of my life. He can just feed me all the time, right?
Yeah.
Which is what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. And then he said this thing about you have to gnaw my flesh and drink my blood. It's like, oh, wait, you know, the Leviticus talks about we can't eat blood, right? That's forbidden. You don't want to clarify that any further? You want to go any further on that? Well, this is pretty hard. I think we're out. Sorry, you know, we're done. You know. So yeah, these people would have known what was going on.
Speaking about.
For sure. Well, great. All right, guys, thanks for coming. See you later.
Thank you.
Anything else?
One quick, last week.
Yeah.
At, the reading when Moses strikes the rock.
Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't there, I always thought is that when when God told Moses,
Oh, Jesus.
you can't go,
They're the same. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
but you can't go into the promised land.
Yeah.
But in the scripture the other day, it didn't have that in there.
Right.
Okay.
So there's actually 2 versions of that story.
Okay.
There's the Exodus version. I think the other one is in Deuteronomy.
Oh.
So now, but here's the thing: the details are a little bit different, but the same issue. So, in one of the, I can't remember which one off the top of my head. One of them he struck the rock twice.
Right.
We were
Well,
told to strike the rock.
because God told him only strike it
Once.
once, right? Yeah.
In the other version, he didn't tell him to strike it at all, and he struck it. Right. So now, whether it was twice or once, the fact is, it indicated a lack of faith on Moses' part.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what kept him from going to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Because Moses should have known better.
I just remember it because it was the reading last Sunday, and I read it at church, and I remember doing my prep, and I'm reading it, and I'm going, well, I thought there was this little thing about,
Yeah.
you know, doing
Right.
that.
In both versions, though, there's like this: he did something he shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
And that was indicative of a lack of faith,
Which,
or putting his faith more in his staff than it was into God. Right.
tell you what, if I'd have been here and all these people were crabbing and whining at me
Yeah.
like they were, I
I
probably
would have hit it
I
5 or
would
6
hit it.
Well, that was
times.
the point, right? That's the whole point. He's like, these guys are going to kill me. Can you help me out here, right?
I love the words
Yeah.
they use in that reading. You know,
Right.
these people are that would not.
Well, there's actually, that's funny. There's some humor. There's always a lot of humor. Like there's the story when I think it's in the Book of Numbers. Joshua and another person was sent out to reconnoiter the land.
Right.
And they came back with these like huge grapes, or whatever. And they said, "Oh yeah, the people are like giants, or like grasshoppers." And you know, Joshua and Caleb was the other one. They're the ones that was like, "No, we should go. We should take him. Right? God's with us. Why don't we?" And it says after they say that, people started to pick up stones to kill them. Right? So it's like, well, wait, so do you believe or don't you believe? I mean, you've been traveling the desert 40 years. You've been doing all this great stuff, and now you have these 2 people out of all the people that went out to reconnoiter. They're saying we can do it, and you're saying you're going to kill them, right?
It's one of those.
What's that all about? Yeah.
That's one of those things I always think of when I do a reading and they talk about stoning.
Yeah.
What a way to
yeah.
go.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
That would be a rough way
It's
to die.
oof.
I bet it would take a long time to die.
Oh,
so
yeah.
People throwing rocks.
Well, my understanding then this is more from first century Judaism. The way they would do it is they would bury you up to your waist,
Oh.
and then they would just again take turns. And then
Oh, see.
the honor was what they call the coup de grace.
Yeah.
Was that the honor of the person was actually take the big stone and bash it over their head. That was
Oh,
the
my
final blow,
God.
right?
Oh.
But that wouldn't be until everyone got a chance to throw a rock. Right?
I always love it because it comes up in discussions. You know, people are like, you know, it's got to be the end time because the world's just way more brutal now. And I'm thinking, no, they're not. You look at the stuff
always
that
been brutal.
it's always been brutal.
The
and-
Romans were masters.
Yeah.
They were masters.
Yeah, and I always get annoyed when people are like, "Oh, everything's just worse now than it used to be," and I'm thinking, no, you need to read a little history.
The Romans, as religious and as like kind of actually, they were very cultured. I mean, there's a lot of the great things came out of Rome, the same way we Greek.
Yeah, sure.
But the Romans, they know how to kill people and not just kill them, but like make them feel as much pain as possible.
They were an example.
They were. I mean, I think the craziest thing, and this is really what Jesus experienced, which is just kind of crazy too, is that never in the history of the Roman Empire was somebody scourged then crucified until Jesus.
So that was like
That was
the
unique.
first time
And
they did that. Huh?
yeah, and so you read the Gospels, some of the Gospels seem contradictory, but they're all in line with each other. So it's evident that Pontius Pilate wanted to free him. And the way he wanted to have him freed was to have him scourged. Now, in Mark, the chronology is a little bit mixed up, but it does coincide. So it kind of says how Pontius Pilate gave Barabbas, but then it tells him what happened between there. There's sort of a different mix-up in chronology on that one. But the point is, before Jesus was brought out to be presented between he and Barabbas, that's when the scourging happened. And the scourging for the Romans wasn't like 39 lashes or 40 lashes or whatever. It was the entire cohort got a chance to do it until they got tired. So we're talking about like 25, 30 men, soldiers, who would just take turns until they got tired. They would have the next person, and the next person, they got tired. So, and not only like, it was just like a whip. You know, they actually traditionally would use what they call cat o' nine tails,
Yes.
which would have like pieces of metal or bone in it that would actually rip into this flesh and tear it off. So these depictions of the crucifixion we have are very, very G rated, right?
Pretty sanitary.
Right, they are.
Yeah.
Because if we were actually there, we would be sickened, I imagine, by what happened to him. Because oftentimes we have to have a scourging, they would die anyway from lack of blood.
Yeah.
So when Pilate brought him out, he was like, "Look, isn't this enough?" But the people were just like, "Nope,
Kill
give
him.
him that cross, let's go." Right?
Well, and the crucifixion is always misrepresented
Oh,
too,
sure.
because he was nude.
He was fully nude, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the
Indeed.
humiliation.
And again, for modesty purposes, especially with children. I mean,
I
there's a
know.
reason
Yeah,
that,
it would be
but yeah,
pretty
right,
traumatic
exactly.
if
I know.
I mean,
but
there's reasons, but yes, it was humiliating. It was
especially
barbaric.
for the Jew, especially for
Yeah.
the Jews and their modesty.
Right, right.
For
Yeah.
the Romans, it wouldn't have mattered
Yeah,
so
probably.
much.
No.
But
Yeah.
But it was complete humiliation and the most degrading thing. But to have crucifixion put on top of that was unheard of. That was never done, right? So yeah.
Now the other day, maybe was it yesterday? Or one of your homilies in the last couple of days, you talked about Herod, didn't you? What I'm asking is, I always thought Herod was Jewish, but he's not.
yes, he is.
He is, but
Okay.
Herod's line came from a Greek ancestry.
Okay.
So they were like Jewish in the way like cafeteria Catholics are Catholic,
Okay.
right? So like you think of like a CEO, right? They like
Okay.
so. In other words, Herod would have been there for the great feast,
Okay.
but he wasn't necessarily there to be like
I got you.
worshiping God.
Okay.
He was there basically to be seen as the leader, and then he would have his feast and do whatever he had to do, right?
Okay. So
Yeah.
So he was from Jewish.
Yeah, so he was a practicing Jew,
Okay.
but he wasn't of Jewish heritage.
Well, it's interesting because you see, I always think Jewish people have a little bit of a uniqueness in that that's not only their religion, but it's their culture. I guess,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
We all usually claim to some different, I'm Polish and
Yeah,
Irish, okay?
yeah.
You know, but there's lots of people who are Jewish, but
Right.
they're not
Right.
practicing Jews.
right.
They,
As a matter of fact, I would say a majority of Jewish people today, unfortunately, are not they're
Yeah,
more cultural than they are actually religious Jews.
I know it's always
Yeah.
refreshing. My son lives in U City. I love going to his house on Saturday morning and driving down Delmar and seeing everybody, the folks that are more
Right.
Orthodox,
Yeah.
walking on Saturday,
Right.
and all that.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to remember just
Oh,
over
yeah.
there,
Well, I mean, I think it's funny. Like, when you think about Judaism, I mean, there's something similar. It's actually funny. There's similarities between like Catholics and Protestants, as well as like Sunni and Shiite Muslims, right? So,
okay.
so there's kind of like you have like the Orthodox, which are like kind of like akin to the Catholics. Like we hold
Yeah.
the traditions. We have, Then you have like more Reformed, who are like more like Protestants. So they don't necessarily keep the kosher laws, do all kinds of, but they kind of like they'll come to the synagogue on Friday.
Kind of abridge the rule book.
Actually, as a matter of fact, back when I had cable, it was interesting. One Friday night, I don't know why I was doing this. I was watching this the Jewish network, and they were showing these different shivas, these Friday night services.
Yeah.
And it was initially it was very beautiful. It was really well sung, and it reminded me a lot of the Mass, as a matter of fact. You know, liturgy of the Word, and they had this chalice. They would have these blessings, and it was like, hey, I know that. You know what? I can get that. Then this other one was more reformed, and I imagine it was sort of like a Protestant service. It was just like, more like, oh, hey. I mean, it was more.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting because I see there's this similarities between Christianity and Judaism. And the Muslims have something similar. I can't believe it's the Sunni or the Shiite. I think it's a Shiite. The Shiite are much more traditional. That's where Shia law comes from, right?
So they're,
And Sunnis are more kind of, I think, more kind of on the Protestant side when it comes to that thing. So, and not to say that's bad or wrong or whatever. But it's just like it's like you can see those kind of interesting distinctions between them. Yeah.
I got a kick out of your comment earlier about the Missouri Synod Lutherans.
Yeah.
Because I worked with a wonderful family that were all Missouri Synod Lutherans for 45 years. And, we talked a lot. And as a matter of fact, but it was interesting to see that, especially with the Missouri Synod Lutherans, they were very careful to do things different enough, even though it was similar to Catholicism, it was different.
Right.
And I've also been to like an evangelical Lutheran church, which is a whole whole different deal.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting.
Well,
it's
even between those like different, I guess you would call sects. I'm not really sure how you would characterize it.
Yeah.
But even then, like even the Missouri Synod could hold that and could not. I mean, it's all very interesting how they.
You're probably too young to remember it, but you guys probably remember hearing about it around the early and mid '70s. There was a big deal here in St. Louis called Seminex, and it went on in the Lutheran Church, and it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there was some reforms and there's some, but this family that I knew, they had like cousins and stuff that went along with this Seminex, and I mean, literally were kind of like shunned. It was like, okay, this is a big deal. Well, because the Missouri Synod Church is right here in Kirkland.
Right.
That's their headquarters. They tried to get rid of their president because he participated in an interdenominational service after 9/11.
Oh yeah,
That was
I for instance, like I had a cousin who got married to a Lutheran girl who was Missouri Synod, and we had to give him dispensations to get married in the Lutheran church.
Okay.
And I couldn't be a part of it at all.
Oh, you were
you
welcome.
can do it. It's like, all right, that's fine with me. I mean, that's fine. I give him the nuptial blessing at the reception, whatever, fine. But I mean, it's interesting. I mean, as I remember, I was talking to the pastor. He's like, I mean, it is kind of odd. I'm like, oh, it's fine. Yeah, that's cool with me. That's we can do something. That's fine. But it's just kind of amazing.
I actually, when we were talking about Jewish, I actually over here at the Mariac Chapel over at and also there, one of my nieces by marriage got married over. Well, she got married the summer after Rose and I did, so it was 13 years ago. She married a young Jewish gentleman, and they had the wedding. He's passed away since. His Father Valls, who used to be out at Incarnate.
Oh yeah, I know.
He passed away. He was
associated back on Heart when I first got there.
And he was, with the wedding along with the Jewish rabbi, and it was pretty. It was interesting because the customs like the breaking the glass and stuff were really,
My brother-in-law is Jewish, and they got married up in Chicago at the old St. Patrick Church. And my cousin did he was the priest at the wedding, and the only thing he wanted, he was actually open to that. Like, one rabbi's like, well, no, but I do want to break the glass at the end. And he was like, oh, okay. So they did, and I guess it wasn't wrapped up well enough, so he stuck it and just shot out. So the priest got it back, and they crushed. So but the thing is, like, what's funny was I don't think he knew what that meant, what the tradition of that was, right?
Okay.
So the tradition of that actually goes back to it's actually a call for the establishment of the temple. Right.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah. So we won't toast again until we're back in the temple. That's kind of the idea. So breaking the glasses. We're not going to toast until we're back in the temple. But it was very. Yeah, the traditions are actually very interesting. I mean, that's why we see a lot of our roots in Catholicism in the Jewish people.
Yeah, I mean
the Jewish traditions. Yeah. So it's
all the baruchs that are actually in the mass.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah, I mean, if like so, that was so amazing when I was watching that service. was it was very similar. It was like, oh, I know, yeah, okay, you know, it was beautiful. So yeah.
Father Paul Neiman had sit there one day when we were doing, I guess, a Paschal, and he was going through. He says, "Now this is the same Baruch that we use in the middle of the Mass here. You know, bless us." Well, you know,
Baruch LOI.
and he's
Yeah,
going on through all the different.
Yep.
We're use this, and this is part of the Mass also, and it's like, come on.
He was our Jewish go-to guy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I know at St. Peter in Kirkwood, I think it was Monsignor Costello. He put in a mezuzah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
the door there. So you come in the main door of the church. There's a little mezuzah.
We actually, back in the 80s at St. Kevin's, had a Seder supper.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was neat. It was, and
St.
I remember.
They had
At
the
St.
Jewish-
Williams,
too?
we had
Okay.
several
You know,
years in a row.
A lot of
we had
parishes, a
Seder
lot of
Seder
parishes
suppers.
do that.
I think
Yeah.
that might have evolved out of, you remember the program Renew?
Yes.
Yes,
I think that evolved out of Renew back in
Okay.
the early 80s. That was
yeah.
I think that was one of the first
We were-
programs where you met at somebody's house.
Yeah, there were.
It was
there
like
were
a 10.
We were,
some actually appear like in the parish hall. I mean, you'll have
Yeah,
people.
yeah, you had.
we were married in 77.
Okay.
Andrew Sigmund married us. And
He's on Sorrows. Yeah.
that following Easter, he had the Seder meal,
Yeah.
in the basement of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we
I-
went, and it was.
Yeah, Seder's become very popular in
Yeah.
a lot of places these days. Yeah,
Yeah, I was
in
really-
the Catholic world, I'm saying.
I was really impressed. I mean, it taught me so much about the Jewish
Yeah.
heritage, you know,
Yeah.
just seeing that. And
Yeah,
seeing
the chair for
symbolism.
Elijah. And,
Yeah, it was the symbolism behind it.
I need to have that Seder meal 2 or 3 times a week. I would need some.
I was going to say, it'd probably be a good diet. wouldn't it?
All that
At
bitter
St. Williams, we had a group come in from New York City,
Oh, wow.
and these were families, and they were actually living in the rectory,
oh,
Oh, really?
but they were doing a program. They were basically Puerto Rican, and had this whole, you know, Christ thing going on, and they were trying to do this renewal of everything.
Hmm.
It just really didn't take off. But
interesting. Okay. That wasn't Christ Renews His Parish, was it?
no,
Okay.
no, this was before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I was good. That was one quick question I wanted to ask you too, Father, just for your background. Have you been involved with anything like Christ Renews His Parish or some of the different?
The last parish I came from, they had actually that's 2 parishes I came from. They had very strong Acts community.
Okay, that's
Yeah, Cursillo.
Yeah.
So yeah, as a matter of fact, one of my good friends, he actually found his vocation through a chirp retreat.
Well,
yeah.
that's the one I was going to mention
Yeah.
because back in 4, 5, 6, 7, because it was right before my wife died, we had a very successful run of chirp retreats at Holy Spirit. Don't say that, Mike. Holy Trinity.
Trinity, okay.
And it really was a game changer. It
Yeah.
really was. It really made a big difference, and certainly for
Yeah,
me.
no, I see a great benefit from Acts in like the Acts community and that
Yeah.
those they're usually the ones you're like there for parish. Now, I think some of the drawbacks is though sometimes is that Acts almost becomes the centralized focus, and so what happens is you see people come to Mass when they're there for an Acts thing.
That's their.
Yeah.
What was the retreat we put on, Mike? Gosh darn it! 13 and 14.
What did we put on?
Oh, come on! I can't believe I can't remember.
When
I still got the manual at home.
And see, I think all of that depends too. Like, I know my dad went on an Acts retreat at the parish a couple years ago, and I think it's also too depending on where you are in your spiritual life, because I think the Acts is definitely very beneficial, especially with those maybe just like trying to re-engage with their faith and try to like learn more about the faith.
Yeah.
We did we did Emmaus.
Emmaus
okay,
is what
yeah.
it was. Yeah.
I but also too, like my experience with Acts retreat kind of came later in my life, so like I've already been on at that point silent retreats every year, 5 days, 8 days, 30 days silent retreat. So yeah, I mean, so like it was definitely a different experience, and both good.
Yeah.
But I found much more fulfillment, and plus, when I was at the Acts retreat, I was more working. You know, when you're there as a priest, you're kind of like there to work. So, but I imagine if I were like in high school or like college or like even like a young adult, that would have been very beneficial for me. Yeah.
When Father Dolan first came to presentation from Webster Groves, they had an active group of acts,
Okay.
and so he knew one was coming up. So there was 3 of us, I think, from presentation that went. It was my first experience with any kind of a retreat, and I got a lot out of it. And one of the things that was so impressive, I've never forgotten it. You start on a Friday night. Well, you know, first they have a little meet and greet. Then we're going to go out and pray. We're going to do the Stations of the Cross.
Well, you can't. Is that River Rule? Can you tell what's going on here? Can you reveal these things? I think a lot of these things are kind of secret. Yeah. Should I turn the camera off?
Well, anyway, one of the most impressive things with the Stations of the Cross, they actually have a live person hanging on the cross.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So to be fair,
They
I
did
know.
that one.
I know they have changed up a few things too. Yeah. Now some of them I see the reasoning. I think some of it's a little bit overkill. Like for instance, I know.
If you did it Hispanic, it would be an overkill.
Yeah, I mean it's I don't know. I have my own. I can see the reason. I can see both sides of it, so I kind of keep out of it. But I mean, I know some people were very upset with the changes they made because, like you were saying, Ken, I think when you go to your first one, you have a certain experience, and as they kind of get more focused on the theology and the reasoning behind these things, you tend to maybe when it changes, your thought is, oh well, hey, that was so great for me. Oh, now it's not going to be great for someone else. And it's like, well, maybe, you know, I don't know. Or maybe it's just unique. You know, maybe that's the idea behind it.
Well, with me, it kind of hit me all of a sudden. I think that's not a statue. I think that's a...
Oh, you didn't realize at first that it was a real person.
No. And maybe there's a little subtle movement or something, you know. And then...
Was he nailed? Was it nailed involved?
They made it look like it, but I think he was actually tied.
Well, come on, we're gonna commit. You know, come on.
Isn't that down in the Philippines where people?
Yeah.
Oh,
they still do that, but I think I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I saw on YouTube. I was looking at some of the Mardi Gras in Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, really?
And here's this one guy carrying a cross in front of, you know, and he's all scourged and everything, and he's carrying a cross before all the.
I know also too. There's supposed to be like kind of a mock thing they have down there too sometimes.
Okay.
And it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know all the details, so I don't know. But yeah, I've seen that before too.
It was just like a flag. Wait a minute. Yeah. You know.
Well, I mean, Mardi Gras is a religious event too. Mardi Gras is right. Yes, but yeah, I mean, it developed from this kind of anticipation of the 12th night into Lent, and so it's I think people tend to all these secular things we have. I mean, even coming up pretty soon, St. Patrick's Day. That's a Roman Catholic saint. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, whatever it is. So even though Valentine's been off the calendar since '69, but hey, he's still Catholic.
No, and one of the reasons I first brought this thing up about retreats was I didn't know if you'd been thinking about different things.
Well, I think part of that maybe in the long term we might look at those.
I mean, I know it's early.
I mean, it's part of that. Part of that is understanding too. Like there is a financial aspect of that.
Well, you're right.
And so we're still waiting to see what happens when everything falls out from our financials, which hopefully by June we should know that. But who knows?
That
they still
merged in the two.
Yeah. So right now the big question is we've had a lot of the funds already merged, but there's a question about debt, right? So presentation had a bit of debt. I mean, so either way, the money's coming, and we have money coming in, and even if we had just that, we'd be fine. We would know we can do some things with those and kind of get things going. But there's a kind of big discussion right now going on about the debt for some of these subsumed parishes. What's the just thing to do? So maybe is there a reduction in that? Right? Can the archdiocese waive certain things? Like for instance, and there's always been tradition of the church of like 2025 is a jubilee year. And if we look in the Old Testament, Jubilee years, hey, all debt is wiped away. So
Oh.
maybe that be something. I don't know.
You want to practice?
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you
What do you get a biblical standpoint? I don't know. So we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like, and I think they're saying by June they will know for sure. Yeah,
Aside on all
right. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, regardless, I think we'll have some in the next fiscal year. We'll have we'll have enough funds to kind of do some things. And I'm talking to the finance council. I think we have some plans like invest some, and then we definitely have some repairs at both places we probably need to get done.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're looking at in the future. But I think those are going to come to fruition probably in July-ish.
I like presentation, but I was only there a couple of years, transplanted from Trinity.
Yeah.
But part of me is like, let's go ahead and rip the bandage off.
Yeah,
And let's,
Mike, that's something I've been discerning as well, because here's the thing, we're still getting people coming over there for the Tuesday Mass, and that's good. And I don't want to.
oh my God,
I don't
It's
want.
amazing.
And I don't want to deprive that.
Yeah.
Tuesday Mass is
Right.
almost
Right.
double.
Oh yeah.
Oh, easily.
But-
Yeah.
But the other side of that coin is like you're saying, is like,
It's an
is that
expense.
causing? Well, also is that causing?
Division.
Are we still divided?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's also St. Anne people too that come to that Mass. I mean, so it's
Yeah,
definitely that's the parish Mass, so good.
Yeah.
And I don't have any plans to change that.
Yeah.
But I mean that's been a question I've been discerning for a while now. It's like, when would be the time if we're going to do it?
Yeah.
Should we do it? I mean, it's
I mean,
difficult.
now,
This is unique in
I-
the fact
You can
that
do it after I die.
There you
Okay,
go.
I'll keep that in mind.
but I love,
Can you give me like a time frame on that?
Well,
I love PAC being over there though.
Yeah,
PAC being so involved in the community,
yeah.
I don't want to see that go
Are you
away.
going Saturday
Huh?
night?
Oh, Saturday night's
I'm
the-
going
Yeah,
Saturday.
I'm going to Artie
Well,
Route too. I'll be there. I'm just to see how it goes.
I
Oh,
do,
Very good.
I do
Well,
the-
it has been very good.
Yeah.
I do PAC, I do the water
Mike's
tower.
real involved.
So I
Um,
use PAC, but
Well, I just, from my own personal point of view, because I'm 46 years over there, almost
Yeah.
47, I think it's great that you're doing what you're doing, and I don't want to see you end that. And as far as the masses on the holy days and when you can do, I tell the people, anytime Father Madden has something over there, if I have to crawl to get there, I'm going, because I want to show him my appreciation.
No, I appreciate that.
Because
No. Yeah, I mean I know, but I mean also too, like part of my out here with these things is that's what was given to me, right? So I mean if that's what's given to me, okay, and as long as there's no reason not to, and I think the big reason that we have to look at is the unity aspect.
Yeah.
And so, right now I think there's like about close to 200 families that still haven't really, are still
committed.
floating, and it's like I want to keep you involved, and I want to do this for you, but we have to get some clarity about. I mean, because we can't do this forever either.
We were
see, I guess
there are
it's
some,
St. Williams and Trinity, there was just, the doors closed, goodbye.
Yeah, I don't like that approach either.
we were
because,
told, we were basically told these buildings, as of your last Mass on Sunday, you'll never get back in this building again, basically.
Yeah.
And so we came from that experience where it was like that. Now, it was a little bit odd because we did the two campus thing with St. Gregory's original campus and St. Kevin's campus because the school was at St. Kevin's.
Okay.
And that probably contributed to the downfall of our parish more than anything, because we were, as I always said, we were running St. Charles style campuses.
Yeah.
Big, lots of money, lots of brick and mortar,
Right.
and we didn't have St.
Charles
Charles
funds.
collections.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it really, and we were shocked. They closed Trinity. When did they tell us they were going to close Trinity? 17? I think it was 17. So, Bishop and everybody comes out and they basically said, "You guys owe us $2 million," and we're sitting there going, "What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Well, we've been pumping money into school." Well, we didn't ask you.
Well,
to
and see,
pump money.
see, here's the nice thing about that: we don't take subsidy from exercises.
We're not taking anything right now, right?
Right.
Okay,
And so
that's great.
that's the benefit, and so
Yeah.
that's also why we're not that's not being assessed to us either. So now the problem with presentation was they were taking one before they closed, and so that's been just kind of accrued year over year. Hasn't been growing, but they just kind of kept it there, which is also why they haven't put it over into our coffers yet either.
Gotcha.
Because I think they're still trying to figure out what we're gonna do.
They're gonna do.
But yeah, no, I mean, in some ways, like not having a school is actually more fiscally better.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't have to worry about that cost.
Well, see, and they come in and said, guess what? You're now a Latino Caucasian parish.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, and that's not the first time it's happened in
I
some
love
either.
the Hispanics.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, I know when my dad, he grew up in North City in Holy Name, and at one point after this was shortly after, well, I guess it was a little bit after they kind of, combined, so it kind of became a predominant black parish, right? And so it wasn't like, hey, you got to go. It was just like, hey, now we're kind of, we're going to do this now. And so, okay. And so they did that they lived down there for a while, and then they had to move because there was a lot of violence that was happening. It was that sort of time when things started going, south. They traveled south and went down to South City. But yeah, I mean, so that's not the first time. I mean, the Archdiocese has a history of kind of bringing people together in those ways and trying to accommodate. But then I think also too, like, to shut down a sacred edifice and say no one can walk in there anymore. Well, the purpose of this is for worship.
Yeah.
And so the pastor should have, and I think that's where Paulton's knew the Archdiocese did a good job of this, was to say, look, the pastors, you're on the ground, you make the decision, right? And so, but also too, the pastor can't blame the Archdiocese if they close something. So there's a double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
But I think also too, like, yeah, I'm happy to use that space because it's a beautiful space, and it's direct. I mean, it's usable.
Yeah.
Right. And so as long as that's the case, I see no reason not to.
Yeah. And like, especially for daily mass, it's way more practical just because it's so much smaller.
Well, so, like Father Dolan today this morning, because he said, yeah, I kind of figured I'd take this mass. You didn't have to travel from St. Anne, but then I realized you're living here. I'm like, oh yeah, this is my easy day. I get to wake up from downstairs.
Get to wake up a little later.
Yeah, it's not bad. He's like, oh okay. But that was good. That was good to have him there. Actually, I stole his homily this afternoon for the mass at the Raleigh Center. It was a good homily. Yeah, it was good. I was like, I'll take that. So yeah, no, it's that's the other thing we were talking about that today in the staff meeting. No homilies are original anymore. They're all stolen by somebody. I mean, there hasn't been an original homily in like 1,000 years.
So much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah.
But it was yeah. I'm planning to use it as long as we possibly can. So that's kind of the idea. But yeah, I kind of wish though that unity aspect. I don't know what to do about that, because I mean, we have talked to a lot of people saying they're going somewhere else, and good. That's fine. It's just those people who haven't said anything. It's just like,
and that's
you're ours now. But
when I did my phone calls, I got a lot of that. We're still shopping, and it's like, which, under the old model, you're not supposed to be shopping. You're supposed to go where you're supposed to go.
I talked to a gentleman. He called me the other day, and they're so close to All Souls, so that's where they've been going.
Yeah.
But the husband, they go to the Saturday evening mass at 4:30, and he says, "I'm sorry," but he says, and he told me the name of the priest, Paul Rothschild. He said, he reminds me of a Baptist preacher trying to say mass, and he said, I just can't take it no more. So they've been going out to Holy Spirit. Well, the wife don't like Holy Spirit because she said it don't look like a church to her. Well, that's me too. And I says, well, come on. And they've been to Christ the King. And you say, I says, well, come over to St. Anne.
Yeah.
I says, come over. I'm going to ask you, just come over and try it. And he says, we will.
Okay.
I'm trying to hustle some people from Ferguson over here.
But I know.
Because they're going out to Sacred Heart. And I'm like, you guys, St. Anne's right up the hill.
Yeah.
Get on Florissant Road.
There's some people from Presentation who have come right out and told me, we will never join another parish. Never. They are so hurt because they're lifetime members. Presentation is the only parish they
I understand.
and
the thing is,
I know that, and I don't know I don't even know if you know this, But I do know just within the last month to 6 weeks, I'm seeing more and more people from presentation. How many have actually registered, do you know?
I think it's somewhere around 100, maybe over
100
that.
people.
Yeah, 100. Well, 100 families,
families,
right? Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah.
more than I thought.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I talked to a few people this last week, and partially it's because they wanted sacraments brought to them. And I said, okay, great. And then I kind of said, oh, are you? It doesn't. I said, it doesn't matter. I'll bring you sacraments regardless. But are you planning to come? Contribute to St. Anne? He said, oh yeah. Okay, great, cool. So I just gave those names on to Chris, and it's like, okay.
I think
So.
Yeah, I think it's just going to take a little longer than.
Oh, probably. It probably will. I mean, it probably will. I mean, because like you said, the hurt's still there.
Oh yeah.
And as long as the hurt's there, time does heal wounds, but that may take some time. Like I understand. Like I said this often. My home parish is about subsumed by the neighboring parish. We had a big rivalry with them, and so it was like it happens. Like all right,
Yeah.
But also too, I mean, I understand the reasoning.
Yeah.
I understand the reasoning. So
And I think people are just afraid to be tied down anymore.
Sure.
Well,
you know what?
I don't know if it
well,
was.
tell you, most millennials and younger aren't.
No.
They kind of shop around too.
Well,
So I mean,
Well, why should I go someplace and be, like you said, be uncomfortable or be angry? I'm going because I want to be fed.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
That's the
I
most
will
important.
look.
Well, but here's the thing, Mike. I mean, and we talk about this actually. I don't know if you guys watched the Friends Food and Faith aspect there, but I mean, part of the big discussion we had there was, why do we go to mass, right? That was the main focus. And people don't understand. We don't go for the music or for the readings or for the homily or even to receive the Eucharist. That's not the reason we go. The reason is that because every Catholic church throughout the world, you can go and witness the resurrection, the death, the passion of Jesus. That's why we go. That we actually are made present to that moment, which is why we can call ourselves witnesses, right? If we look at the book of Revelation, the witnesses around the throne, those are mass goers.
Yeah.
Those are people that actually witnessed these things and brought present to it. That's what the mass does. And people don't understand that.
Yeah.
And we kind of wonder, like, why don't people understand this real presence of Jesus? Well, if you don't know why we don't go to the mass, then obviously we wouldn't know that it's the real presence of Jesus. So it's that's I think a deeper question.
It's hard for some people, for a lot of people too, and because I think for a lot of people the faith wasn't. How do I want to say this? Faith might not have been their number one reason for going to church.
Well, I mean, I think if you pull a lot of, and I don't think it's telltales out of school, but I think if you pull a lot of the current St. Anne parishioners, and you ask them, hey, why do you go to mass? I think a lot of them say, oh, or why do you even kind of attribute to St. Anne, or oh, the community. I'm there for the fellowship. I'm there for the people. It's like, good.
Yeah,
but if that's your only reason, you can find that in a Baptist church or a Lutheran church or anywhere else.
You
I'm
don't
sorry.
necessarily need to go to church.
Right, exactly.
Fraternal
Right, exactly.
organizations,
You can go join a social club or something.
I was thinking about
Yeah.
that because I through the years have heard people say to me, "Oh yeah, I'm a good Catholic. I belong to blah 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 parish. I coach the soccer teams and I do this and I do that," and they never say anything about
Going to church.
or just yeah. I mean,
To that point, I think I might raise some of my fellow Irishmen, but I was thinking about going down to Dogtown on Sunday with a bullhorn and being, shame on you all.
Yeah.
The reason this exists is for the Catholic Church.
Not,
And if you're not going to mass or coming here, shame on you.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
Yeah.
I like having a good time, but obviously too, the whole purpose of that parade, the whole purpose of those events is because the Catholic Church sanctions it, blesses it,
originally.
and does it.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to mass or coming to here, shame on you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
This is just another place to
So,
go
yeah.
have a beer somewhere.
Right,
It's
exactly.
Like, that's and I sometimes when I think people get misguided, they think, oh well, I do all these things at the parish. Well,
And good. And also, hey, you know what? Thank you for your service.
But-
But if you're not experiencing that in the spiritual life,
you're missing the point.
you're missing. Yeah, faith without works is dead, and
Right.
works without faith is dead.
I think that's where so many of these retreat programs are valuable
They can
in the
be,
parish because they can take people who were participants. We had 2 guys out of our church retreats that decided to join the church. They were married to Catholic women. matter of fact, the one guy, I didn't even know he wasn't Catholic.
Yeah.
I mean,
Actually,
I mean, he even he sang in the choir. He sang in the choir, and I just never paid attention. He didn't go to. I didn't think anything about
I did a
that.
few of those in my last parish, Mike.
Okay.
It was my mission in life before I left St. Gabriel. It was
Get
stipendium
those.
in RCAA, and I failed.
Okay.
But
Well,
but the thing is also too, I realized that a lot of this, I found out this afterwards. I think a lot of this was familial ties. That even though it was my parents are this and my grandparents are this, and if I were to convert now, that would break their heart. I get it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very compelling argument. My response to that was like, be not afraid, but also too, I get it. Like if I were to convert to some other religion with the background I have, my parents trying to instill what they instilled, it would break their heart. It would,
Yeah.
right? I mean, not as a priest, obviously, but I mean, even as a priest, yeah, it would break their heart. And I would not want to do that. But that shouldn't be the only reason I don't do it. Now, to that point, to your point, like and this may be something to prepare everyone for the summer. Usually, in the past, I've prepped for RCIA in the fall by calling all the non-Catholic members of our parish, whether they're married to a Catholic or if they're registered or engaged in some way. I typically call them and just invite them to RCIA in the fall. I found that bears a lot of great fruit.
well,
But yes, to that same point though too, I think the acts and those chirps, they do help.
Yeah.
And so that could be something we could look at in the future, I think.
if you make parishioners that are stronger,
Right.
and that kind of I think tends to draw.
Well, that's kind of the point of like these things, right? I mean, so the
Yeah.
idea, like
Oh.
even like the Eucharist revival, I was talking to somebody about that, and they were like, "What's the plan after this?" I'm like, "Well, I think the plan is that if we go to the series, you're going to become the evangelist, and you're going to get your own groups together and show the series and have discussions, and then they'll do the same. And then we kind of have a kind of wave effect, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea is, my job is to make you disciples that go make other disciples, right?
Yeah, because you can't do it on
I
your
can't,
own.
right. I mean, and there's ways we can do that. Like I know over at Holy Name, they're taking more of approach of like go door to door.
Oh, really?
And,
Okay.
well, because part of that is the priest that's there is my classmate, my beloved classmate, Father
Okay.
Samuel. He was a member of an order that was their charism, door to door evangelization. He's bringing that in there. Great. And that can work. But the problem with that, I think, is a lot of people don't have the comfort level with that. And like I tend to say, evangelization doesn't start with let's talk about Jesus. It's let's talk about the cardinals. Let's talk about how's your family doing. Let's talk about, how's your life. It's a relationship first that you bring Jesus into
the farm.
because eventually I think it's with people's relationships, if they see that you're a joyful, loving, faithful person, eventually they're going to have to start asking why. And at that point, we have the obligation to say, well, because I love Jesus and here's where I see him, right? That's like the midpoint, right? That's not the beginning. That's like the midpoint.
Yeah.
So I think if we can, but in order to do that, we have to know our faith too, right? And so I think these are ways for us to do that.
And I think it's interesting because I keep thinking in my own mind, honestly, you talk about knocking on doors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think all of us in our own families now, we don't need to knock on
That's
doors.
right.
But where's the hardest place to evangelize?
Oh, yeah.
Inside your own family.
Oh,
I mean, even Father, you as a man who's a man of the cloth, you probably, think about those relationships with cousins or somebody, where it's
sisters, nieces.
okay.
Here, so here's the thing. What I've been doing, Mike, for a while now is I've been praying for somebody else to come in their life to do that.
Okay.
And what's interesting, and this is the beauty of how God works. My sister were all together up in Illinois a while back, and my niece asked my one sister, she's my goddaughter,
Okay.
what do you do, TT? What are you doing for Lent? She's like, oh, I don't really do that. And I asked my other niece, oh, what are you doing for Lent? Like, oh, we don't really do that either. And she's like, they start getting discussion. Well, why aren't you doing that? I mean, don't you want to do this for Jesus? And then it kind of got to like, well, I don't really believe in that. And then my niece goes into this tirade about, don't you want to go to heaven? Well, I mean, talk about evangelization out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah.
I, as an uncle and as a godparent, could not have been prouder of her. And I saw her just a few days ago, and I said, I am very proud of you. She's like, why? I'm like, because what you said to TT and your cousin up in Illinois, she forgot all about it. But I was just like, thank you, right?
But it's so tough because we've all got these situations
Oh, yeah.
in our families
Oh,
that,
yeah.
you know, we got children,
Yeah.
we've got brothers and sisters, and it's like, you know, I got a sister and 3 brothers, and to be honest with you, I don't even know whether they're going. I've got a feeling they're not, but I don't really know. And to be honest with you, I've never had the guts to just come right out to them and say, hey.
You know, in some ways, like and here's the thing about that too, like you could alienate him further by doing that, right?
Yeah.
And which is why they're not going to judge my niece who's 6 in that respect. She in some ways she's a perfect evangelist, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's
Good
the
point.
innocence of it.
There's innocence.
I
there,
know.
yeah.
It's like, if me, it's like, what's your motive? You have an ulterior motive, whatever, obviously. But no, I think that's the thing is like, I think the best we can do is assume charitably. Because like, I assume like, you know, like when we have like families or people that I know are Catholic and I don't see them at Mass on Sunday, my charitable assumption, maybe they're going somewhere else, right? Good and good. If they are, great. And what's interesting though is you start talking to the kids in the school, and they are very, very honest. And then it's like, okay,
you really find
right,
out what's going on then.
You want to know what's going on in someone's family, you talk to the kids. And you don't have to even bring it up. You just be like, how you doing today? Well, Mom did this and Dad. They're like, oh, okay, well, okay, great, cool. Just tell them confessions every morning, 7:30 if they want to come by, whatever. So I mean, that's so. I think it's always best to assume charitably until you're shown otherwise.
Yeah, I guess
it's hard. I'm the oldest of 12, and me and my oldest sister, who is 3, she's 5 years younger than me, or something like that. We're the only ones that go to church, to the Catholic church. There's a couple that go to someplace else. And ironically, just in the last 2 weeks, my one sister who doesn't live here told me that she was given some information by someone. You ought to go to the Catholic church here, whatever night of the week they have Stations of the Cross, and it's different. You'll really like it. The school children enact it out. And she was so impressed. She really liked it. And I listened to her. I said, I'm glad you went. I said, maybe now you ought to think about going Easter Sunday. I didn't say you should.
Yeah.
I just said you should think about it. No, I don't.
Yeah, I think that's a good inviting, right? It's an invitation. That's all you can really do, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the way you start inviting enough people start to say yes.
Yeah, because you don't want to get to that point where when you come into the room, people are avoiding you
Right.
because they're afraid you're going to be
Right.
Yeah, because I have mentioned to some of my brothers, and no, there's just no way.
See, I think at some point I'm just going to get so upset. It's just going to be like come out at some point, and that's the thing. It's like I don't want to do that, so I've been praying for that time too, but also looking for those opportunities. Like one thing, like with I have a niece and nephew that are baptized, and like it's weird because I don't think my sister